This is our this week's episode of AAL MICS, which stands for AI Accelerator Lab, presenting Major Innovative Constructive Showcase. And we are a recurring interactive showcase that spotlights breakthrough work from founders and innovators in AI and adjacent creative fields. So I'm really happy today to have Cas here with us because each session of MICS is designed to foster exposure, meaningful connections, and knowledge sharing. And Cas is and founder of KANS, which spells KANS, a design studio exploring AI, aesthetics, and global narratives in architecture. And he's currently based in the States and teaching at SCAD, SCAD. And the work spans build projects, installations, and research. Previously project leader at MVRDV with experience on large-scale projects all over the world. So, Cas, how are you doing?
Hi, Adeline. Thanks for inviting me, and this is awesome to be able to join this group. And it's also funny when you said like MVRDV, KAN, it's 5 letters maximum. I think that defines my life story, but it's pretty funny.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us in this podcast. And I thought you're going to bring a very lively session today, and I'm so curious to hear about what you're working on recently. So it's a selfish reason I asked you to join. And like you said before we started the recording, I always like to call you between your 6 a.m. and your 8 a.m. But it just can't be helped because of the time difference that we're in and you're in the States. So thank you so much, all jokes aside. So we're going to structure today's session in such a way where this first 10 minutes is going to be chit-chatting, and then in the following 20 minutes, we're going to ask you to present your current works and whatever you want to show the audience, which is mostly on AI and design, I believe. Yeah, so what you moved to the States recently, I know, and now you're taking an academic role. How's that been? How's it going?
Yeah, it's a really fun challenge, actually. So I can tell a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So after I studied at the TU Delft, when I graduated, I started to work at MVRDV. And within 2 years, I moved up from, let's say, junior to project lead, leading quite fun projects and nice projects. And then for a few more years, I did that. And I found myself, working a full-time job, going
Mhm.
home, and then diving into things like AI, 3D printing. We built a trading bot for the stock market. We did all of these fun, exciting things, but generally, I was very much a passive participant in or a passive viewer in this big online discussion. But for
Mhm.
AI, I kind of decided, hey, what happens if I also joined this discussion more actively? Started to post about it on Instagram and on LinkedIn, started to give courses on PA or parametric architecture, started to meet with people like you who are, incredible connectors in this space. And through that, kind of built out my name and was able to go and make my hobby, which is kind of what you did after six. So from 9 to 6, I worked
Mm.
for MVDV. And then from 6 till 9, I worked on everything which
Mm.
obsessed my life, and pulled
Right.
that into my real work. So it was a lot of fun to then take the opportunity to go and teach, to
Mm.
kind of give that 6 to 9, more space. So that's an incredible amount of freedom and fun. But with that, I'm trying to say it's not only freedom and fun, but it's also really a lot of interesting stuff that you're able to do as you teach and spend more time to think and more time to reflect. So I think later when I'll present a few thoughts, I'm really just going to present 3 different thoughts to you guys, 3 different things that are on my mind that I
Mhm.
just want to shoot out there just to see what kind of happens. But just to get back to your question, I guess teaching is a really fun challenge that gives a lot of freedom for, let's say, mental exploration. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's particularly interesting to see how our generation, like how to put it this way, like architects or practitioners who had been interested in AI, who are currently interested in AI, how their career paths moved forwards in the past 2 years. And I'm particularly interested in that because I think you are very strong in your technical skills and you're also very strong in your teaching skills. I would say that my personal strength and interest is in the entrepreneurial side and the business side and the personal career development of architects, how they navigate into the new step, the next step, how they go forwards in their careers now with AI in the picture. And I can see what you've done. in a higher view is that you have gone and realized that actually your 6 to 9 is the future for you, is something that is worth developing, worth exploring, and you put your bet on it actually because you can see the potentials of it. That's why you put a bet on it, and that hobby now becomes basically what you're teaching and becomes KANS. And I see that and I observe that, and I think that is probably going to be for the same for a lot of people as well, meaning they see that this AI thing or the technology that they're interested in, or you use the word obsessed, that actually is more meaningful than the 9 to 5 job or the 9 to 6 job that may not acknowledge the importance of technology, and they make a bet, they make a move, they take the risk and to move into that direction. So yeah, that's why I like talking to you because you have gone to this path and I like to hear kind of what you do next. And I support you in many ways as well in hoping that you would succeed.
Yeah, I think there is this 9 to 6. Like, of course, I really enjoyed my 6 to 9. I think working at these larger scale firms, BIG, MVRDV, Derksevint, really design forward firms is exciting, but you're always working for somebody else. You're actually realizing their vision, and part of your job is believing in their vision, loving their vision, falling in love with their vision, and then bringing it into a reality, which of course is how you learn, right? You have to learn through partially through emulation, and that becomes sort of your understanding and giving your twist to it. But it'll always be a twist, the moment you kind of step out of that, you're free to more pursue your own vision and your own goal set.
Mm,
And defining that vision is extremely tough. And I think
yeah.
that's also why I think my website, which I launched already 2 or 3 months ago, I still didn't do anything more than just a landing page. Well, I've done a lot more, but I just never feel like I'm ready to really launch it. You
Hmm.
feel, I put on the website kind of as a joke, it's launching this month. So it's always accurate. It'll launch sometime this month, but maybe next month it'll launch that month, but nobody knows. But
Hmm.
I think there is also this defining of a really clear mission and vision, I think is
Yeah.
very tough.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's easier to also lock into another firm. But then to
Hmm.
find what's yours after being I spent 6 years at MVRDV. I spent time
Hmm.
at these other firms as well.
Yeah.
To find what is my vision versus what is
Yeah.
their vision, and to pull yourself away from that is very tough.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it is another level of stress, or rather another kind of stress when you are the one to make the decision for where you're going in your life instead of having a certainty, because the pro side of working for a firm is the certainty, well, or the seeming certainty that you would know what you're doing and you just need to follow someone else's vision, like you mentioned. Speaking of vision, now I think it's a good time to see what you've got for us today and how your vision is being envisioned by yourself. So please share a screen when you feel ready.
Yeah, of course. I think I really approached, so you told me you have 20 minutes to kind of talk to
Yeah.
a bunch of really smart AI people or people that are interested in the AI field, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So I thought, or we thought, we sat down with the little team we have here, KANS, which means opportunity in Dutch. That's kind of the idea. So we're like, what do we want to talk about today? And so is it our fascinations, our thoughts, our observations, and maybe kind of the easiest way to approach it is just to say, what we want to share with you guys are three interesting things in the AI world and the AI space right now. Because as you all know, the AI space is filled with, let's say, a new update every 24 hours, it seems. And each one requires not only you to learn a lot of new stuff, but also to shift your way of thinking each time. So I just want to share these three paradigm shifts or shifts in thought with you all, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So the first thought I want to talk about is the flux generation. I think currently we are in the flux generation after kind of leaving stable diffusion or the SD, these base models, SD 1.5, SD XL, SD3, leaving those kind of behind right now. We are fully in the flux generation and launched last week, which Flux Crea, which is a fine-tuned version, let's say the Flux Dev model. I'm going to talk to you guys like you're all quite advanced, but we're all, so I'm not going to explain what all of this exactly means. But just we're talking to each other like we are all deep into this stuff, right? So the Flux Crea model is just sick. It's new way so it's a fine tune of the Flux Dev model focused on, let's say, artistic expression, but also on realism. So it gets rid of this AI aesthetic haze in a way, which is very nice. And then I put this image in there because it's a gaming magazine from 1997, and they talk about this picture, I don't know if you can see my mouse, of this monster, and they say, Unreal, this is an actual screenshot. And in that moment, in 1997, they were shocked by the graphic fidelity that they had in their video game. And I look at it and I think to myself, yeah, I'm also shocked by the graphic fidelity of what these AI models are doing. But for sure, in 10 years, people will be looking back and thinking like, this was horrible. How did they even imagine that this is good? Now we look at this image and think it's actually kind of funky and it has some kind of energy to it. But in the reality is it's not a realistic graphic at all, right? So here on the left, SDXL, on the right, Flux Crea, and here SDXL and Crea. You see the model is far more refined, far more realistic, and knocks the one on the left out of the water in a way. What's a sharp thing I want to talk about specifically for this and how I'm able to, across different models, create similar results is through this cross-tool consistent prompting, basically JSON style prompting in which you define, let's say, a key concept like the scene. And this is how I would recommend everybody to prompt from nowadays. So you define a key concept and then you start to describe that concept. Of course, nobody writes these things. I don't write these things. I'm using ChatGPT, which I trained or asked to work specifically for JSON prompting to approach it this way. So we're talking about a scene. So you create a bucket, a general idea, and then define that idea. Structure a bucket and then define it. A big concept and define it. You talk about scene, structure, materiality, lighting. You can even define it more specifically with type and effect, experience, the entry, the interaction, the tones, the human presence, the style. And finally, one which I find as being quite successful is to add in a series of references. Thinking about how these AI models work, they're always trained on, let's say, big data sets, and these data sets are tagged specifically with also the creators' names, with the type of work. So by adding into your prompt references, feels strange to do, but it is very functional in a way. So that's how I could be able to, let's say, prompt multiple times across different tools, SDXL and Flux, Comp Crea, but maintain the same qualitative output. So that's just something I wanted to show you. Then Flux Context, you probably played with this already. I think this one is the most boomer friendly, let's say, AI model out there right now, because, a boomer looks at this thing, he says, or he or she says, hey, I want to remove that thing. You type in remove that thing from her face, and it does it. We say, put her on the street, put her in the snow. It does it literally. And I think it's one of the most powerful AI models out there today. And I'm going to show you why. Oh, yeah, first, a few thoughts I want to share with you guys is when you prompt in Flux context, be super specific. Change the datetime, but keep the original painting style. You can add negative prompting or things you want to maintain within the main prompt, right? So be aware of that. If you don't say things like transform her into a Viking, you say change her clothes to Viking armor, keep face and pose. Be really specific. Say exactly what you want. The model is super smart. I think this is the first model I would call smart, actually. So use that to your advantage, right? I see people struggling with it, but you have to turn yourself into the dumbest self to interact well with this model. Yeah, and do it in steps. Save each step, re-upload it, change it. That way you're staying strong. So here, this is some of the student work, right? You'll see as I jump between the images, Flux Context is not the same as control nets on SDXL or any of the other models. it's very different. You see it jumps quite heavily. It interprets and then re-shoots that thing out at you in a way. So there's quite a big difference in the way. So you can't really consistently cover the same image, but it stays the same, funnily enough. So here you see mood changing. The students used the flux context model to, let's say, explore buildability, but also how their building would look like and interact with the environment in the different seasons, right? Or when there is a party, what would it look like? So it's a visual design tool in a way. Another really powerful one. And when we were doing this, I started to think, oh man, there's something more to this model. Really old and ugly, well, I won't say really outdated looking landscape images instantly with very little work, hey, change the daylight settings, make more realistic. Boom, you get something which looks, I don't know, Mir probably wouldn't make something like this, but something more professional in a way. I hear a child is very excited, which is great. And then specifically, what we need to do as creators is creating LoRa's, of course. So specifically for Flux context, the LoRa creation is different. And I want to talk about that a little bit, is when training a LoRa for other models, all you create is a set of images and prompts related to that image. For Flux context, when training a LoRa for it, you create a pair. So an input and an output image. So this gives you more freedom. So here I kind of created a set of pairs, with on the left, the output, and on the right, using Flux context, I created a low-res Enscape version of that photograph. And did that a few, so you would probably think this is Enscape, right? You can see this horrible lighting. And on the left, you can clearly see it's a photograph, but they're so similar. We can use these to train a flux context model. So on the right, left, allowing us to do it. And I asked Ismail to borrow his sets of images, and he was gracious to let me borrow it. My own server was down yesterday. I was very annoyed, but it's fine. Where I wanted to show you guys, hey, so training these images, where you train an Enscape low-res input, the result is a high-res, beautiful photograph. You can train flux context to go from very specific inputs to very specific outputs. So Ismail created one on low-res Google Earth images that then automatically, without any work, this is one prompt, right? One generation. There's no photoshopping. There's not 1,000 images. You can get something really high-res and high quality and usable. He did the same thing for his other two LoRa's, the sketch one to a render one. So with very little work, you're able to, no control nets, no complicated heavy models, no changing the noise. This is just using the smartness of the flux context model to go from your generic input, which could be and should be maybe just a screenshot from Rhino, and then becomes something, spectacular and realistic. So our first interesting thing was, hey, let's talk about the flux generation, which we're in right now. The flux era maybe is better. And our conclusion, I think, is that we all need to be creating our office-specific flux context LoRa's. Within the office at which you're working or within your own workflow, what your easiest output is. Maybe that is a screenshot from Rhino. Maybe that is an Enscape render. And because you've done this a million times in your office, what the render quality needs to be at the end. You have those two inputs already. You have folders full of those two inputs. Put them into Flux, train this LoRa, and use that within your firm and save so much time. It's very easy. I really recommend doing this. It'll take some work getting used to it, but I think this is the future for your own firm. Okay, next thought I want to share with you guys. Let's see how I'm doing on time. Okay, AI aesthetics. As technology is developing, and these aren't really related. I'm just kind of riffing with you guys. As technology is developing, it's really clear that the technology that we use to design influences the architecture that we build. So, for example, the magazines showing architecture in the 1900s was extremely limited to just black and white print when they're doing multiple, shooting out a bunch of images. Those black and white images possibly were the ones architecture students were then looking at. And that greatly influenced the architecture that was being built into being very modernist, black and white, and that even now influences the modern villa aesthetic. So because in the 1900s or 1932, magazines were being printed in black and white, we now see a modern villa in this stucco white. It's quite interesting, right? The same thing goes for these other technologies like CAD softwares like Grasshopper or whatever. As they're being developed, the literal architecture that's being created changes. As Grasshopper becomes more and more accessible and more teachers know it, more students know it. Yeah, promise me, but I know you all created a Voronoi roof at some point, right? And that's the most generic student project you see around campus. So the technology influences the outcomes in the real architectural world. For AI, we don't really know yet what is going to be the real world outcome of all of these AI tools. AI, accessible AI has only been out for a couple of years now. Thinking a design process for a serious building takes maybe 5 years. We're still waiting to see what those initial outputs will be, but we're very interested in it, right? Because looking back at, let's say, version 1 for Midjourney, I put the same prompt in. So this is version 1, version 2, version 3. We can all really recognize this as AI images, but as we start to go up in versions, the AI image quality kind of is removed, right? This very funny video. We're even at a point right now that I don't always know. Like maybe you guys are really good at this, but I cannot tell you which one is real and which one is AI. Both of these look, maybe it's just the type of knife, which doesn't make much sense for cutting bread, but the one on the top is also doing it. That's the real, but it's the AI aesthetic. It's unclear what that is. And maybe there isn't actually an AI aesthetic anymore, but not a relevant one as we, progress in these models. Yeah, so maybe not. What there is, though, is there's a different type of impact that AI has on us. When, I'll take the top left one. When you are a human being walking around, looking around, you are just seeing the thing in front of you and you're perceiving it and evaluating that as you're looking. And that's the only architecture. So I'm being very specific just for architectural inspiration, right? And you look through a magazine, your vision broadens, but you're also very much aware of the fact that this magazine is curated, right? As you're going through Pinterest, Google, and those types of things, you're broadening your horizon, you're seeing more, but you're also still very much aware of what you're not seeing, right? As we're going into AI, our horizon is extremely broad. Actually, we can generate almost anything, it feels like, but it suffers from unseen obstacles. These are things that you're not always aware of, right? And funny enough, here I just typed in house or housing project, very American housing projects. This is Midjourney. So pretty interesting. There's housing projects all over the world. Why would Midjourney only generate housing projects in America? Very weird. What if we type in green tower? Okay, these all look like Bueri ripoffs, right? But there's more green. Like if you go to Singapore, there's thousands of types of green towers. If you go to Africa, there's a lot of green types of integration. There's different ways to do this. But because the way that these models are trained, they're trained on the images that are high res available to them. So probably scraped from websites like Dezeen or ArcDaily. The results are very much Western focused, which is extremely boring because we have a whole globe to pick from. And then we're choosing to, ignore the whole of Africa and the whole of, let's say, Eastern Asia, maybe who knows what else is being left out. We just don't know. So I think yeah, this is the question to you guys. Are we okay with this? Of course, no, we're not. We need to change this. We must adapt because these diffusion models run based on these sets of images and we are able to influence them. How it's being generated, we can influence them with LoRa's. So here, a LoRa, one that I created based off of vernacular architectural systems. But then what we did, so let me explain this. So as a reaction to, let's say, the Dezeen-oriented AI generators, we created a selection of images of vernacular architecture and then tagged them in a way that they become almost impossible not to prompt for. So not saying, hey, this is an overgrown hut in the Netherlands. We say, this is a single family home with green roof. So as you're prompting for a green roof, this is referenced as well. So your exploration or architectural exploration becomes much more fast and much more expressive and fun. The same thing here. This is not, let's say, an art facade. This is actually a multi-story housing, mixed use, colorful. That's what you want to prompt for. So we're kind of removing the Western judgment from the prompt. We're making this generic prompt and we're inserting images like this into the model. And that changes when you prompt, let's say, modern villa in the forest from this to this. Not only compositionally, or what's interesting is there's some type of difference in composition, difference in material, difference in, let's say, cultural reaction. So you see, I would say this is almost like a Chinese roof, and this is like this tatami mat Japanese interior, and then you have this very minimalist Spanish. So it's global, where all at once we're referencing much more. So as I know I'm reaching out of time. I have one more thought. Is that okay after this, Adeline? Okay, perfect. So the second conclusion I want to share with you guys is that through model influence, through creating your own LoRa's, we need to return the architect to the role as a critical designer and not just as this curator. I think the curator word, and I'll react to it later as well, is one we need to get rid of. I want to be careful. We don't want to be just curators. We don't want to train curators. We want to be critical designers. Okay. And then finally, in pedagogy, so that's in teaching, I want to talk about it, a thought I've been having. So what happened to exams when the calculator was introduced, right? Of course, I asked Google, and Google gave me an AI answer, but it is fine to talk about because we also already kind of know it. Initially, calculators were banned from classrooms. And then slowly testing started to catch up and be like, hey, we can do way more if we allow students to use not just a normal calculator, but also a graphing calculator. So, and then all at once it became mandatory to buy the graphing calculator before going. So everybody had the TI-84 or whatever when I was growing up. So even though initially there is this anger or this misunderstanding of the quality of this tool, but over time we see a stronger acceptance, right? I think in education, we are still in the initial resistance and we should be working towards shifting our attitude. But when I think, okay, what can AI do for students? I start to get a little bit worried. So what I did, the last project I did was with my students within Smith Island. We designed for an island which was disappearing. And then I just went into ChatGPT, put it on, it said zoek, but it means that's the Dutch word for online search. Say, what's a good concept to deal with Smith Island? Boom, it knocks out a good concept. And then I said, okay, generate a text, in text, a conceptual approach, and a visual language and identity. It did it. And then I said, write a prompt that shows off this concept. I need a plan, sections, 2 renders, and a striking title. Okay, it does it. And I say, make it, and it made this. So this was a 15-minute workflow. Is this good architecture? Well, not really. It's not very exciting and interesting. But this plan is interesting. This idea is interesting. This relationship with the water is interesting. We do not fight the water. We build with it, above it, through it. This place will change, and so much the architecture. Interesting, right? Archipelago, interesting. So there's a lot of interesting things here, but the value, I'm still finding it hard to evaluate this. As a first-year bachelor student, this would be a great project, almost, right? It's missing some stuff. But is it a great project if I only spend 15 minutes on it? I'm not sure, actually. So Sarah Coderin, a very smart educator, I don't know, she said something like this, but I wanted to at least mention her. In a meeting we had, in education, we're shifting away from judging projects by their final outcome, and we're focusing more on the process that leads up to them. Process-wise, this is a 0, right? This is not a design process. There's no research. There's no thinking. Final outcome-wise, it's fine. It's a 6 out of 10. It's a 7 out of 10. Render-wise, it's a 10 out of 10. It's awesome. These look great and funky and weird. So as we're making this shift, I think the way we teach also has to shift, right? So maybe our evaluation rubrics, which here if we have research, initial concept, midterm, and final, being focused on final, need to shift to being more evenly distributed or more focused on these 2 initial steps, research and initial concept, and much less on final, because actual final production is pretty easy. Maybe actually we're shifting for the left to being these monks, or doing every little thing, drawing every bolt, to being more towards on the right, this lazy curator sitting back and selecting the one piece that'll go into the museum. Both maybe not the right visions, but we need to be aware of who we are and how we're integrating AI into this. We don't want to create the person on the right, but we don't want to be the person on the left. So there are some, I don't know what to do. And this is a post I made a while back. The final frame that you create, that's often shared, is a result of hundreds of images that come before it. And that's extremely true when it comes to AI generation, because you're generating thousands of images just to pull out that one or Photoshop that final one, putting yourself somewhere between the monk and the curator, right? You're a curator, because you did just generate an image in 2 seconds and that's the one. But you're a monk because you also generated it 600 times going up internet. So that weird idea is kind of concluded in this, like, hey, it takes 6 months to learn how to generate that perfect image in 2 minutes. And that places you as an AI agent or an AI person, AI active integration, an AI architect. Wait, let me rephrase this. That places you as an AI critical designer somewhere between the monk and the curator. And I think that's exactly where you need to be. So that's 20 something minutes of thoughts and ideas that I just wanted to share with you guys. So thanks for listening to me endlessly talk about this.
Bravo. I think that was very good. I'm going to take the liberty to have our 15 minutes of one-on-one discussion, and then I will open the floor up for anyone to ask questions or to start discussion with you. So, first of all, brilliant presentation. I can see how much effort you've put into this, and it was very clean, very clear, very easy to follow, and with a lot of deep thoughts, but very practical as well. So really, really nice. I can see how well you teach and how it is an enjoyment to listen to you. So I would like to, I've written notes, and I think in the first conclusion, you mentioned every office needs to train their own flux. Maybe I just touch on this for a little bit. I just want to clarify when you say that it is assuming that they all need the graphic outcome, they all kinds of designers or architectural firms or architects, they all need to produce graphics. And by training their own flux, they basically can have higher quality of renders in shorter amounts of time based on their office's style. Am I understanding correctly? Is that your point?
Yeah, and it's not higher quality, maybe. It's more an office, no matter what style they do. Maybe they do the collage style, maybe they do super realistic renders, maybe that's somewhere in between, or they're obsessed with these 90s, badly Photoshop renders. Flux context allows you to choose what you start with and what you want to end with. So you can skip all of that in between work in a way by being very specific in what you train it to do. So the goal is not to, say uniformly change outputs, but it's about people being able to train a model to do exactly what they want it to do, very
Yeah.
specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Cass, I want to share with you also about a recent discussion I had with a client. Basically, her question was, how much are those AI renderings worth? Because basically, my team does a lot of things. One of the things we do is to provide AI renderings. And we also have extended teams, extended partners who do very, very good job in that. Now, she asked me how to evaluate those AI renderings and how much effort of a person had been put into the final outcome. And I was very transparent with her. And I said, sometimes if you just want the iterations, if you just want to see what it looks like, it is very AI heavy. Maybe it's 10% to craft the prompt, 90% it is the AI's work. But if you want it to be the highest quality, you want it to be on a poster or you want to show investors, it has to be very important and no mistakes. Then you craft the prompt, you generate the outcome, and then you upscale it and refine it humanly, like with human labor. So it becomes almost like AI takes 60% and the human still does 40. And if you keep pushing that limits, like if you keep saying, oh, it's still not good enough, you want the small tweaks to the point where even Flux cannot do the very tiny detail things, then it might even be like 40% AI and 60% human. And how to evaluate, how to put a number, like cost fee schedule on that is an art on its own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the question is why is a client paying for the render? Are they paying to make people work and they want people to run around or are they paying because they want to have an image which communicates their concept well? And they shouldn't be paying for the hours if there is somebody who's really like it reminds me of this lock pickers, right? People who help people who are locked out of their car. It's quite a tough task to learn, but when you learn it, you can do it really quick. So this guy was going around saving people who locked themselves out of their car. The first times he did it, it was so tough. He was really having a hard time. It wasn't going well. He was trying different techniques and failing. And because he was sweating, people would give him a big tip. They'd be like, oh, thanks, man. It's tough. Then he got so good, he could walk up to a car, jam the right tool in. He'd done it before. He unlocks it in 2 seconds. He opens the door, and people would be like, why am I paying you for this? This is too easy. I shouldn't pay you anything, actually. So by getting better at his job, his clients
Mhm.
got angrier at him, which is very funny. And I think it's
Yeah.
good to remind clients that they're paying for an outcome, not for an hour spent. And yeah, because who cares how many hours something takes? They should only care about how incredibly good the image is at the end if they're paying for a
Yeah.
render, or how the car is unlocked. It's unlocked, right? It's perfect. That's what you paid for. Enjoy it, you know?
Well said. Yeah, it is another art on its own for the business negotiation in that sense, It's a discussion about how to value the outcome. And then the bigger question is architecture or architects, we provide a service. It's a consultation service. Is that service now just the renders on its own or more? But it's another discussion that can go on forever. But yes, well said about what you said. And the second conclusion was that curators, just being curators, are not enough. Architects need to be critical designers. And I particularly like what you said about the gaps in the data set and how if you prompt green roof, it's not giving you exactly a fair average. It's not giving you a fair outcome because it is only referencing a certain group or majority,
Mm-hmm.
it's missing out all the minorities or all the fun parts. Reminds me of in natural language processing, which is a large language model, that side of AI. They also have this thing called low resource languages, like for example, Cantonese, my native language, or certain Scandinavian languages, they are low in resources, which means the large language models actually they may not be in the large language or the large language models that have those languages probably cannot do as well as they do in English because of the data set size. And I like how your point to say that therefore we need to learn how to fill those gaps. We therefore to train our own LoRa's because we need to be critical designers and just picking at things. And I like the two photos you put next to each other in the third chapter where you have the monks on the left and the lady on the right, which I think it's a very good point. Because I think a lot of times now we jump into becoming the lady where we just say this good, this bad, this good, this bad. But then we also don't want to become the artisanal monks, right? Because that's not very that's no one wants to do that forever, I think. I like to focus on one carpet forever. So I also like how you were very honest to say we don't know. We don't know exactly what it should be. We just know it does take 6 months to learn something, like to learn how to render in 2 seconds. So now the question is on education, and you mentioned at the education now is shifting from outcome to process, right? To teach the thinking behind the process. And I think in business, the outcome is still the most important because you know what clients are like. At the end of the day, they don't really care about your process. They care about, well, it depends on the client, but let's say the majority, right? They focus on the outcome, right? So it kind of goes back to the first point, which is how they evaluate, how it is evaluated, how we should evaluate it. Yeah, so I guess it's not really a question for me, but rather just sharing my thoughts and reflection from all the things
But that
that
makes me
you
happy
said.
because, yeah, that was my intention. I'm going to throw three thoughts that I'm really working on. I'm not sure about them yet. And let's see where we land because it is just the challenge we're all facing right now. Will AI elevate artistic expression? Will it ruin it? What is it doing right now? Who's going to be affected the most? Like all of these big questions are all tied into this curator versus monk discussion, I think. Yeah.
I think I'm gonna quote you in the paper that I'm writing now. You should write a paper, actually. Maybe you are already, now that you're an academic. Perhaps, perhaps you're just writing a lot of papers on this as well. I'm keen to read them.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about being an academic. I have a lot of time to think about things. It's kind of the
Good.
trick.
Right. This is such an interesting conversation. I think I will be less selfish and see if anyone wants to ask any Q&A questions. Feel free to ask in the chat or turn on your mic, etc. And while we wait for a message or we wait for someone to think about what they want to ask you, Cass, when you were working in a practice, in your last practice, how is it different to your startup now in terms of the way you do things, the way you produce? Because I know that even though in your last practice you were given a certain degree of autonomy, now you have all of the autonomy. And now with these three conclusions that you put together, how does it affect the way you do things or you work? And how do you want to, what kind of things you want to do now that you have these realizations?
Okay, big questions. I think for
Mhm.
me, as I kind of switched from practice to more research focused and then also my own little thing on the side, I think the magic in it is being able to do whatever I wanted to do and what I think makes the most sense, right? That is also, funnily enough, being aware that it's doing things as a group is also very powerful. You're way smarter with 300 people working together versus me alone because I'm very limited to my own knowledge set, right? So I found being alone or not alone with a small group of people to be very much more collaborative than being in a bigger office. So I spend a lot of time meeting people, talking to people, understanding thought processes, how other people are approaching it, doing things like this. In a way, you're way more socially active than I was in practice, because in practice, my job was
Mm,
very clear. I need to bring this project from phase this to phase that. And then that's what I'd
mm.
be focused on. And doing that well was what I was doing, right?
Yeah.
But now I need to do so much more that I need to get more help also and communicate more. I think that's the big
Mm.
difference.
Right. Okay. Got it. So we have a question in the chat. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you envision the
How,
relationship between traditional
mhm,
craftsmanship and digital technologies? It's a super good question. I think in the recent Venice Biennale, BAG did something great with their Bhutan thing. So they had half of this wooden pillar being built by a robot and the other half being built by craftsmen. And when you went to check it out, it was clear the one made by the craftsman was better, but the other one wasn't bad, actually. And it was a really fun challenge to ask people, hey, which one do you think is which? So it's really
mm,
interesting. There is a lot of value in traditional craftsmanship and doing things the right way, learning how to do it, thinking about composite, like for renders, let's say we just spoke specifically about renders. A person that is good at making renders understands composition, understands color theory, understands storytelling, understands the project that they're trying to represent. And all of that knowledge, that base knowledge, isn't easy to build, right? It's done by following classes in which you place shapes on a thing. It's by watching a lot of
mhm,
movies. It's about by drawing a lot of inspiration from the work, doing a lot of photography. So they understand all of these things and then can apply it to their render. The new way to make a render allows me to make something that looks like the one created by that guy with all the knowledge, but actually isn't, because I also think, let's say the AI images I make and put on my Instagram, they don't go super viral, get a lot of likes. It's because I'm also not an image maker. I'm not a person who can make beautiful
mhm,
renders in the same, I wasn't trained that way. So I understand about storytelling. I don't understand composition or color theory so much. And I'm relying on the
mhm,
AI to help me with that. But it's a kind of a trick because you still need to understand those things to make good images. I think what these new technologies will do is they won't, let's say, elevate the best people. It will more get rid of the worst people in a very strange way to say it.
mm,
I think all of the cheap slop, which is floating at the top, it'll be so much easier to read. It's like we transfer art or Facebook graphic design, or Amazon
mhm,
Prime, those types of things, they're art. It's a graphic style, but it's just not interesting. It's not saying anything. It's not
mhm.
relevant. So those are the things that'll kind of disappear more and more and be more automated. But there will still be place for creative expression, I'm sure.
Fair point.
Okay.
We have a thought in the chat from Simon. I do think the succeeding evolution is the collaboration of both fields together. It's not faced against each other. A lot of people do a competition out of it, but it has not be one as such. Doesn't have to be as such.
I don't
Mm.
fully understand it, Simon, but I think you're saying tradition and technology
Yeah, I
should
think
work
that's what
hand
he
in
means.
hand. And you're completely right. And I completely agree with you. You need that knowledge basis to be there to be able to continue because at some point you're going to start to forget what composition is because it's auto
Mm.
generated and you say auto compose and you auto this and you auto that. And then you wonder, wait, why is that auto? who created that auto thing, and is that
Yeah.
actually correct? And you still need to be able to ask those questions, you know? Maybe not for
Yeah.
a small generic project, you need to ask those questions, but globally, we still need to be creating those questions and finding exciting answers to them. I think that's what creativity will, that's why we'll still stay strong in the creative world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's valuable. I also want to stress that, and perhaps this is not the nicest thing to highlight, but the fact that I think most of the buildings around us or needed in this world, most of them may not need a high level of design, if that makes sense. Most of them just need to be code compliant and they need to be executed. They need cost optimization. And that part, I think they need a project manager more than an architect. Like, how to define architect is also something I keep thinking about all the time. Like, an architect as in a creative person who has, deep thinking and understanding and, and energy to really tell a story and not just produce images. That is an architect. But then there's also the project manager who needs to do all the code compliant, non-sexy things. That's also needed and perhaps even more needed in terms of numbers than the creative architect. And so now I see two groups of two different roles basically, and both right now are under the hat, under the name of architects. And I see AI doing for both. AI doing what you've just presented for the creative architect, but AI for all sorts of automation like document automation or code compliance AI for the project manager. So I see it in both. And I think right now it should be distinguished in my personal point of view, because when people talk about architects, they just think that it's one person who does both and one person can, but in a lot of cases the clientele is completely different. The clientele who looks for a creative architect is someone who probably looking for like a private house or a cultural center or something that has more, how to put it, like taste, right? And someone who just needs a factory building doesn't need that. So there are two types of demands, and I'm referring this to the industry demand and the just like what this world needs and how this business is run. I don't know if that's
I
relevant,
think
but that's
I think maybe
that's the top of
people
my head.
feel I think maybe people feel there is no architecture in some of these things, but I would try to push against that
Mm,
and say, even though you don't think you need architecture to make a factory, I would recommend thinking about it. And there is always a lot of opportunity in these things. Even
mm,
the boxes that you drive on the highway, between cities, there is architectural opportunity in them as well to be more
mhm,
efficient, smarter, interesting. I imagine that even though, let's say, the designers at Bulgari or whatever are very out
mhm.
there and creative, I don't think that the designers at Uniqlo are less creative and less out there and
Sure.
less avant-garde. They are still trying to do something. They're trying to push the envelope, but in a different way. So I do really still think there is a lot of value in that type of, yeah, I wouldn't say that creative exploration isn't a part of, or you cannot be a critical designer and design factories. I think there's still a critical design in all of these features. It's just how your focus is what I would say is different.
Okay, I hear you. So let's see if there's anyone else who'd like to ask a question. We're almost coming to an end, so one or two questions would be great to finish off. And while we're waiting to see if anyone wants to ask one, Cass, I ask this every time to my guests. So here's your question. If you have to use one word to describe success for you, just one, what would that be for you?
Yeah, I saw it in the list. For me, it's for sure freedom. I think the moment you're free
Oh.
of financial barriers, free of stress,
Mhm.
free of judgment, free of all of those things, and you do things for yourself, that's when you're really successful, I think.
Nice. I like that. That's new as well. Haven't heard that one before. Okay, so looks like there are no more questions,
Cool.
and seems like everyone just needs to kind of digest all the good stuff that you showed us. So I guess I can also use this opportunity to say that you are now judging one of the things that we're pushing right now, which is the ADFA AI Design Frontier Awards. And thank you so much for being one of the judges. And the link is in the chat if anyone wants to check it out. And the second thing that might happen is that you might be invited to come to Hong Kong at the end of this year as you're shortlisted for something. We shall see. But that's super exciting, and I really hope to see you in person very soon.
Cool. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to, have this nice discussion with you, and also nice to talk to all these people here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay,
All right.
bye.
Bye bye, guys.